Some ancient civilizations didn't leave behind stories, they left behind giant stone warnings. A 165-ton rain god carved from volcanic rock, golden armour buried with a king, and altars older than writing itself. All real, all forgotten, all rediscovered by accident. These discoveries weren't meant to be easy to find. They were built to intimidate, to protect, and to outlive everyone who touched them. Stay till the end, and subscribe now for 7 years of luck and ancient secrets. The giant granite falcon of Nekhen, Egypt. Along the banks of the Nile River, where the annual flood once turned dry ground into rich farmland, lies one of the earliest cities of ancient Egypt, a place that predates pyramids, writing, and dynasties, a settlement that stood at the threshold between prehistory and civilization. This site is Nekhen, the ancient city later known to the Greeks as Hierakonpolis, City of the Falcon. For more than 1,000 years before Egypt's first kings, Nekhen shaped the cultural foundations of what would become one of the world's greatest civilizations. At the centre of this early world stood a massive granite falcon statue, carved more than 5,000 years ago from hard stone, long before Egypt mastered monumental architecture in limestone or granite. The falcon at Nekhen is one of the oldest large-scale stone sculptures ever made in Egypt, representing not only a god, but the emergence of kingship itself. The falcon was the symbol of Horus, the sky god associated with power, protection, and the living king. Long before pharaohs wore crowns or unified Upper and Lower Egypt, Horus was already revered at Nekhen, making this city the spiritual birthplace of Egyptian kingship. This granite sculpture is one of the earliest physical expressions of that idea. The statue once stood at a ceremonial centre within the city, likely near a temple complex built of mud brick and wood. Even in its fragmentary state today, the size and craftsmanship of the falcon show that the people of Nekhen were already thinking on a monumental scale. They sourced granite from quarries far to the south, a heavy, difficult stone that required enormous labour to transport and carve with stone tools alone. The falcon's form is simple but powerful, a broad chest, a strong curved beak, an upright posture that commands space even when the body is partially damaged. The sculptors shaped the stone with precision uncommon for the period, achieving symmetry and smoothness that would challenge even later dynastic craftsmen. This suggests that specialised stoneworkers existed here long before the rise of Egypt's official artisan classes. Nekhen itself was a thriving settlement by 3800 BCE, with evidence of planned neighbourhoods, breweries, workshops, and ceremonial compounds. Excavations have uncovered large-scale pottery production, copperworking, elaborate tombs, and ritual artifacts that foreshadow later Egyptian religious practices. The city also produced some of the earliest known painted tomb scenes, showing boats, hunting, processions, and animals that would later appear in mature Egyptian iconography. The falcon statue reflects this shift from local ritual to political symbolism. At Nekhen, the earliest leaders began identifying themselves with Horus, using the falcon as a sign of authority. This connection eventually became the defining title of Egyptian kingship, the Horus name, used by pharaohs for more than 3,000 years. The granite falcon is one of the first material expressions of that idea. Around the falcon's original placement, archaeologists found ceremonial objects such as mace heads, figurines, pallets, and offering vessels, many associated with elite burials and ritual performances. Among the most famous discoveries at Nekhen is the Narmer pallet, which likely commemorates the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt under one ruler. While the pallet was found separately, it reflects the same cultural environment in which the falcon statue was created, a world transitioning rapidly toward centralized rule. The falcon's size indicates it was not a household idol or minor cult statue. It was built for public presence, likely standing above a courtyard or shrine where rituals were performed for the city's elite. Its weight suggests it was intended to remain immovable, reinforcing the idea that Horus, and by extension the emerging institution of kingship, was a permanent force. Nekhen during this period was not simply a religious centre, but a political powerhouse dominating the surrounding region. Its influence extended along the Nile, and its rulers controlled trade routes, livestock herds, craft production, and ceremonial authority. The falcon statue would have been a visual confirmation of this dominance, symbolising both divine favour and earthly leadership. The choice of granite is significant. Unlike softer stones, granite was difficult to quarry, shape, and polish using only copper chisels, stone hammers, and abrasive sand. The decision to carve the falcon from such material shows a deliberate attempt to create a lasting monument, one that would outlive its makers. This reflects a broader shift in human thought at the dawn of Egyptian civilization, the desire to build permanence into political and religious identity. Surrounding the falcon's context, archaeologists found evidence of feasting, animal sacrifice, and ritual gatherings, suggesting that Nekhen was a pilgrimage centre drawing people from across Upper Egypt. Cattle burials and ceremonial architecture point to complex religious activities forming centuries before Egypt's first recorded kings. As Egypt moved toward unification around 3100 BCE, Nekhen's cultural influence spread. The falcon became not only a local symbol, but the national emblem of kingship. Horus was depicted on royal palettes, early crowns, and ceremonial objects. The ideology that the king was the living Horus began here, crystallizing into one of the most enduring political and religious concepts in human history. Even after the political centre shifted northward to Memphis and later Thebes, Nekhen remained revered as the ancestral home of kingship. Its falcon statue symbolised the origin point of Egypt's state religion and its earliest expressions of centralised power. The statue was eventually buried or collapsed during the city's decline in later periods, preserved only because the desert wind and shifting sands covered rather than destroyed it. When modern archaeologists uncovered the granite fragments, they found themselves looking at one of the oldest surviving political symbols in the world, a sculpture created at the threshold between prehistory and written history. Today, the giant granite falcon of Nekhen stands as a reminder that Egypt's monumental tradition did not begin with pyramids or colossal statues, but with smaller yet powerful symbols created by communities testing the boundaries of stone, belief, and authority. It represents a moment when humans first used sculpture not merely for worship, but to express political identity and long-term cultural memory. When viewed today, the falcon does not overwhelm with size, but with presence. Its carved curves, its upright stance, and its ancient granite surface speak of a society already shaping ideas that would define Africa's first great civilization. It is a sculpture carved at the dawn of kingship, a monument to the earliest pharaohs before the world knew their names. The giant Buddha head of Mes Aynak, Afghanistan. In the rugged mountains of eastern Afghanistan, where cliffs rise sharply out of dust-coloured valleys and the wind carries the smell of dry rock and pine resin, lies one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries of the past half-century, a buried Buddhist metropolis older than many of the world's great temples, a city forgotten beneath soil, copper mines and conflict. This place is Mes Aynak, once a thriving centre of Buddhist learning, art, trade and monastic life along the ancient Silk Road. Mes Aynak stretches across a mountainous plateau carved with monasteries, stupas, fortifications, residential quarters, workshops and storage halls, forming a settlement far larger than initially assumed when archaeologists first arrived. What they did not expect to find was the scale of the sculptures that lay hidden here. Among them, several massive Buddha heads carved with striking detail, emerging from collapsed walls and unexcavated chambers as if waking from a 1,000-year sleep. These giant Buddha heads, some over 1 meter tall, were once part of monumental sculptures that adorned shrines and meditation halls across the monastic complex. They belonged to a time when Afghanistan was not a battleground, but a crossroads of civilizations, a meeting point between Indian, Persian, Central Asian, and Chinese cultures, each contributing artistic influences to create a unique Buddhist identity. Mes Aynak thrived from around the 2nd century BCE through the 9th century CE, during a period when merchants, monks, scholars, and travellers moved along the Silk Road, carrying goods and ideas between distant empires. The city stood at a critical intersection where minerals, trade routes, and religious pilgrimage converged, making it one of the most important Buddhist centres outside India. What makes Mes Aynak truly remarkable is that it was built directly on top of one of the largest copper deposits in Eurasia. Ancient miners carved tunnels into the mountains, while monks built monasteries above, creating a rare environment where economic and spiritual life developed side by side. The wealth generated by copper extraction helped finance Buddhist art, manuscript production, and monumental sculpture, including the giant Buddha heads found across the complex. When modern archaeologists first uncovered these heads, they were struck by their expression. Unlike the serene stillness of Gandharan Buddhas from Pakistan or the compact features of Indian sculptures, the Buddhas of Mes Aynak carry a blend of influences. Their faces are broad yet refined, with elongated ears, gentle eyelids, and sculpted eyebrows that reflect a fusion of Indian spiritual ideals and Hellenistic artistic techniques left behind by Alexander the Great's successors. The heads once crowned full-standing statues that could reach several meters in height. Many of these statues were built using a combination of clay, plaster, and wooden frameworks, then painted in vivid colours that have faded but are still faintly visible beneath layers of dust and time. Traces of pigments, red, gold, lapis blue, suggest that the monasteries of Mes Aynak were once filled with vibrant imagery designed to guide meditation, ritual, and storytelling. The city's layout reveals multiple monastic complexes, each with its own central stupa surrounded by small chapels, monk cells, teaching halls, and storage rooms. The giant Buddha statues were placed strategically to watch over these sacred spaces, embodying the presence of enlightenment within daily monastic life. Their size ensured they could be seen from across courtyards and upper terraces, reminding residents and pilgrims of the spiritual path. Mes Aynak also contained extensive libraries, indicated by the discovery of manuscripts, wooden tablets, and storage niches built into walls. While many texts have been lost to decay and looting, surviving fragments hint at a robust intellectual tradition. Buddhism at Mes Aynak was not just practiced, it was studied, debated, and transmitted along the Silk Road through monks who travelled between India, Bactria, Tibet, and China. Life in Mes Aynak ended abruptly. Around the 9th century, shifting trade patterns, political instability, and the decline of Buddhism in the region led to the city's abandonment. Over time, its structures collapsed under erosion and landslides. Sand, rock, and dust covered the ruins, and the giant Buddha heads fell from their bodies, rolling into courtyards and burial layers where they remained untouched for centuries. Modern rediscovery of Mes Aynak came during geological surveys for copper extraction. When archaeologists began excavations, they quickly realised the scale of what lay underground. Entire monasteries preserved beneath the soil, with statues still partially standing and artworks untouched since the city was deserted. The presence of giant Buddha heads in different stages of collapse offers a unique window into how these sacred sculptures were made, repaired, and used. Some show unfinished carving marks, others bear signs of ritual offerings, soot deposits from lamps, or repairs done with plaster patches. These details reveal how monks interacted with the statues not as museum objects, but as living components of their daily religious practice. Excavations also uncovered large storage jars, coins, tools, ornaments, and remnants of food, painting a picture of a vibrant community that balanced spiritual practice with economic networks and daily chores. Mezainak was not an isolated monastery, but a bustling city where miners, merchants, monks, and travellers crossed paths. Yet the greatest challenge facing Mezainak today is survival. Because the site sits directly atop valuable copper deposits, there is ongoing tension between archaeological preservation and industrial development. Many of the giant Buddha heads were removed under emergency conditions, documented and stored before mining operations expanded. The situation has sparked global debates about heritage, memory, and the value of history in places shaped by conflict and economic pressure. Walking through Mezainak today is a surreal experience. Scaffolding supports half-excavated stupas, pathways cut through rooms filled with tools frozen in time, and in storage facilities nearby, the giant Buddha heads rest on padded surfaces, far from the halls they once watched over. Even separated from their original context, the heads retain a quiet presence. Their expressions seem calm, almost hopeful, as if shaped to outlast turmoil. They are reminders that Afghanistan's ancient past was once a centre of learning and culture, not just a crossroads of conflict. Mezainak challenges the modern imagination because it reveals a forgotten chapter of Buddhism in Central Asia at a scale far larger than previously understood. It shows that the Silk Road was not just a line on a map, but a network of living communities exchanging ideas, arts and technologies in both directions. The giant Buddha heads of Mezainak are among the earliest and most striking witnesses of this history. Their craftsmanship shows confidence, their size shows ambition, and their survival shows resilience through centuries of erosion, burial, and political upheaval. Standing before these heads today, detached from their bodies, separated from their temple walls, yet still expressive, one cannot help feeling that they carry memory beyond their material form. They represent a world once full of colour, sound, debate, and devotion, a world erased by time, but momentarily revived each time a buried face emerges from the dust. Mezainak is not only an archaeological site, it is a reminder that even in places shaped by modern conflict, the ground still holds stories of creativity, peace, and human aspiration. The anthropomorphic sarcophagus of Sidon, Lebanon. Along the Mediterranean coast of Lebanon, in the ancient Phoenician city of Sidon, archaeologists uncovered a burial unlike any other in the region, a massive human-shaped coffin carved from a single block of stone, resting deep inside a royal necropolis that had remained sealed for thousands of years. This anthropomorphic sarcophagus belongs to a long tradition of elite Phoenician burials, yet its scale, craftsmanship, and expressive human features make it one of the most striking funerary monuments ever found in the Eastern Mediterranean. Sidon was one of the great cities of the Phoenician world, a maritime civilization known for its ships, purple dye, trade networks, and cultural exchanges that reached across the Mediterranean from North Africa to Spain. But beneath its busy ancient streets existed a hidden world of royal tombs carved into bedrock, where powerful rulers were laid to rest in sarcophagi shaped like the human form, echoing beliefs about identity, remembrance, and the continuity of presence after death. The anthropomorphic sarcophagus from Sidon, discovered in the modern era through controlled excavation, was carved from an enormous limestone block weighing several tons. Its lid features a sculpted human face, framed by a wig or headdress, with detailed eyelids, curved brows, and a serene expression that appears at once peaceful and authoritative. The body of the sarcophagus tapers toward the feet, imitating the natural form of a reclining human wrapped in funerary linens. This style of coffin, the anthropoid sarcophagus, reflects a cultural connection between the Phoenicians and ancient Egypt, where human-shaped coffins had been used for centuries to express the body's sacred role in the afterlife. But unlike the brightly painted wooden Egyptian coffins, the Sidonian version is heavy, unpainted stone intended to last forever, signalling a shift from symbolic decoration toward monumental permanence. The sarcophagus was lowered into a deep rock-cut burial chamber, accessed through a vertical shaft. Once the burial was complete, the shaft was sealed with stone slabs and backfilled with earth, ensuring that no one could disturb the resting place. Inside the tomb, archaeologists found fragments of grave goods, pottery, jewellery, carved vessels, and personal possessions, indicating that the individual inside held high status, possibly a ruler, priest, or noble of Sidon. Sidon's anthropomorphic sarcophagi show a blend of artistic traditions. The facial features reflect Levantine styles of the early 1st millennium BCE, the body shape draws from Egyptian influence, and the overall composition expresses Phoenician identity at a moment when trade had brought new ideas, but local culture remained distinct. These sarcophagi were never mass-produced. Each was carved individually, shaped to honour a specific person and meant to preserve the memory of a unique life. The weight and hardness of the limestone block required exceptional skill. Tools were simple: copper chisels, stone hammers, and abrasive sands, yet the sculptors shaped the human face with precision, creating symmetry and depth without the aid of advanced metal tools. Every contour, from the curve of the lips to the tilt of the chin, had to be planned before carving began, since mistakes could not be reversed. The result is a work of funerary art that expresses individuality, despite being entirely anonymous to us today. The discovery of this sarcophagus also revealed much about ancient Sidon's burial practices. Unlike Egyptian tombs, filled with elaborate wall paintings, or Mesopotamian graves with brick-lined chambers, Phoenician elite burials often emphasized the body's container above all else. The sarcophagus itself was the monument. Its human shape communicated identity even when names were lost, and its sealed stone body served as both coffin and sculpture. Nearby burials in the same necropolis contained additional anthropoid sarcophagi, each slightly different in facial style, posture, and proportion. Some show youthful features, others depict older individuals with heavier jawlines or more pronounced brows. Together, they form a silent lineup of ancestors, carved in stone and arranged in chambers beneath the earth. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Sidonian sarcophagi is that they appear to reflect an intermediate stage in the evolution of Phoenician funerary beliefs. They reveal a society that valued the physical presence of the deceased, saw the human form as sacred, and believed that preserving the recognizable shape of the body helped maintain identity in the afterlife. Yet the Phoenicians did not adopt Egyptian mummification or elaborate burial rituals. They created their own version of continuity through stone. The anthropomorphic sarcophagus also demonstrates the Phoenicians' ability to merge imported ideas with local tradition. The artistic concept of shaping a coffin like a person came from Egypt, but the choice to carve in heavy stone, to avoid internal decoration, and to emphasize serene facial expression rather than divine symbols reflects a uniquely Sidonian approach. This synthesis of influences is typical of Phoenician culture, which absorbed ideas from abroad and transformed them into something distinct. When archaeologists opened the burial chamber, they found that the sarcophagus had remained sealed for more than 2 millennia, protected by layers of soil and stone. Inside lay human remains, heavily deteriorated, but still positioned according to funerary custom, accompanied by objects intended to support the deceased in the afterlife, the quiet intactness of the scene. A stone body containing a real human body offered a rare moment of uninterrupted ancient history. The burial chamber itself was simple, with smooth rock walls and a flat floor. Unlike later classical tombs, it contained no wall, inscriptions or murals. This minimalism emphasizes that the sarcophagus was the central focus of the burial. Its presence transformed the chamber into a sacred space. The anthropomorphic sarcophagus of Sidon stands today as one of the most important Phoenician artifacts ever discovered. It reveals the aesthetic values, cross-cultural connections, and spiritual beliefs of a civilization whose maritime achievements often overshadow its funerary traditions. The craftsmanship shows that long before Phoenician writing and trade influenced the Mediterranean, the people of Sidon were already expressing identity through monumental stone sculpture. Today, viewing the anthropoid sarcophagus is a quiet experience. There is no grand crown, no royal inscription, no radiant gold, yet the human face carved into stone carries presence, dignity, and memory that transcend the anonymity of the individual inside. It reminds us that ancient civilizations did not preserve themselves solely through temples or cities, but through the way they honoured their dead. The giant anthropomorphic sarcophagus of Sidon is less dramatic than massive pyramids or towering colossi, but its power lies in its intimate scale. It is a single human rendered in stone, preserved beyond history, bridging the fragile line between life and memory. It shows us a moment when art, identity, and death converged, leaving behind a monument that speaks not through inscription, but through form. The great basalt throne of Karakorum, Mongolia. On the open grasslands of central Mongolia, where the horizon seems endless and the wind moves freely across rolling plains, there once stood a capital unlike any other in world history. It was not built around stone walls or monumental pyramids, and it did not rise from a long-settled agricultural heartland. Instead, it emerged suddenly on the steppe, created by a nomadic people whose empire expanded faster than any before them, the Mongols. This capital was Karakorum, the seat of power for Genghis Khan's successors, and the administrative centre of the largest contiguous empire humanity has ever known. Among the ruins of Karakorum, archaeologists uncovered a massive basalt throne, a carved stone structure placed originally near the city's central palace complex. This throne stands today as one of the few surviving artifacts directly associated with the Mongol Khans, a physical reminder of a moment when the steppe world briefly became the centre of global politics, trade, and diplomacy. Karakorum itself was founded by Genghis Khan in the early 13th century, not as a monumental city, but as a strategic base for a mobile empire. After his death, his son Ogedei Khan developed it into a full capital, constructing palaces, administrative halls, workshops, temples, markets, and residential quarters that brought together a diverse population of craftsmen, envoys, scholars, and officials from across Eurasia. The basalt throne was placed on a raised stone platform near the palace complex, which served as the ceremonial and administrative heart of the city. From this throne, the Khans oversaw diplomatic ceremonies, received envoys from distant kingdoms, and conducted imperial deliberations that shaped the future of Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. While Karakorum had many wooden structures, the throne's choice of basalt, a dense volcanic stone, suggests intent for permanence in a city largely constructed for mobility and function. The throne is carved from a single massive stone block, with steps at its front and elevated sides that frame the seating platform. Its design reflects simplicity rather than ornate decoration, in line with Mongol cultural values that emphasized clarity, authority, and symbolic groundedness rather than artistic flourish. The Khans ruled from a civilization of movement, but their authority required a fixed focal point where law, ritual, and imperial communication could be anchored. Around the throne, archaeologists found traces of the elaborate palace quarter. The so-called Great Hall was a large rectangular building used for official gatherings, feasts, and diplomatic meetings. Foreign visitors described Karakoram as a cosmopolitan centre where Mongol leaders received representatives from Persia, China, Europe, Korea, India, and the Islamic world. The basalt throne would have been one of the first objects these envoys saw when entering the key administrative compound. Written accounts from the period give vivid descriptions of court life. The Franciscan traveller William of Rubruck, who visited Karakoram in 1254, described the city as a complex and multi-ethnic environment with craft districts assigned to different cultures. Chinese artisans, Muslim metalworkers, Central Asian merchants, and steppe craftsmen all living within the capital's expanding boundaries. The throne was not merely symbolic, it functioned within a structured political system where the Khan exercised authority over distant territories, received tribute, and issued decrees that travelled across vast communication networks stretching from the Black Sea to the Pacific. From this stone seat, Khans addressed matters involving distant provinces, including taxation, trade regulation, military campaigns, and religious disputes. Karakoram was unique for its multi-faith environment. Archaeological remains include Buddhist temples, Muslim mosques, and Christian churches, reflecting the Mongol policy of religious tolerance. The basalt throne stood within this environment as a neutral centre of power that did not favour one religious tradition over another, reinforcing the Mongol view that authority derived not from divine right, but from lineage, conquest, and social agreement. The throne's survival is remarkable given the destruction Karakoram faced. In the late 14th century, after the Mongol Empire fragmented, the city was attacked and devastated by enemies and later fell into ruin. Wooden structures decayed or burned, metal tools and ornaments were looted, and administrative records vanished. But the basalt throne, too heavy to move and too solid to destroy easily, remained, slumping slightly into the earth but retaining its shape. It was rediscovered during modern archaeological excavations that mapped the city's foundations, revealing streets, workshops, kilns, water systems, and religious buildings. The throne helped confirm the exact location of the palace complex, anchoring the layout of the capital in relation to known structures. The basalt itself likely came from volcanic outcrops in central Mongolia, or transported from regions with established quarrying traditions. Moving such a heavy stone to Karakoram required organised labour, draft animals, and skilled stonemasons, evidence that the Mongol court invested significant effort into shaping a durable symbol of imperial authority. The simplicity of the throne contrasts with the complexity of the empire it governed. The Mongols controlled Silk Road routes, established postal relay stations across thousands of kilometres, facilitated cultural exchanges between East and West, and implemented administrative reforms that shaped the evolution of Eurasian states. From this throne, envoys brought news of distant lands, disputes were settled, and the flow of trade and diplomacy was coordinated on a scale unprecedented in the medieval world. The throne's placement near the palace also indicates the importance of grounded power in a nomadic society. While Mongol rulers retained mobility and often travelled with portable yurts, the throne represented a fixed point of legitimacy. It was the physical embodiment of a political idea that even a nomadic empire benefits from a stable centre where decisions can be formalised and symbolic continuity maintained. The stone's weathering patterns show exposure to centuries of wind, snow, and sun, yet the edges remain sharp enough to suggest its original form. Visitors today can stand on the same platform where Khans once sat, looking out across the open grasslands that were both the cradle and the highway of Mongol power. The landscape itself reinforces the throne's meaning. From its position, one can see the Orkhon Valley stretching outward, a region long associated with steppe empires. Earlier, Turkic Khaganates established capitals here, and inscriptions from the 8th century record royal deeds in runic script. The Mongols built on this legacy, and the basalt throne sits in a lineage of steppe governance that predates sedentary kingdoms in the region. Even after Karakorum's decline, the throne remained embedded in Mongolian cultural memory. The later city of Erdene-Zu Monastery was constructed nearby in the 16th century, using some of Karakorum's stone foundations, preserving fragments of the earlier capital's history. But the throne itself survived untouched, allowing modern archaeologists to connect intangible historical accounts with a tangible object. Today, the great basalt throne of Karakorum is one of the rare artifacts linking a global memory of the Mongol Empire with a physical seat of power. It does not display the elaborate carvings of European thrones or the gilded ornamentation of Asian courts. Instead, it expresses authority through stability, weight, and presence, qualities that align with the Mongol worldview of leadership grounded in lineage, loyalty, and the ability to command across vast distances. Standing beside the throne, one can imagine the atmosphere during a Mongol council gathering. Envoys presenting messages sealed by distant rulers, soldiers reporting from the steppe frontier, monks debating ritual matters, craftsmen delivering goods, and administrators marking agreements on wooden tablets. The throne was the centre point where thousands of small decisions accumulated into a world empire. The great basalt throne of Karakorum is a simple object, yet its survival allows us to reconnect with a moment when the steppe was the axis of world power. It represents a capital city that rose quickly and vanished just as quickly, but whose influence reshaped continents. The throne's presence today reminds us that empires leave behind more than ruins. They leave behind objects that once anchored worlds, and in this case, a carved stone block on the Mongolian steppe that held the weight of decisions, affecting half the known world. The terracotta battle elephant, China, 30-minute calm, continuous documentary narration with long full lines only. When most people think of the terracotta army, they imagine row after row of infantry, archers, charioteers, and armoured officers stretching into the earth in perfect formation. But in a lesser-known section of these sprawling pits, archaeologists uncovered something unexpected: a life-size terracotta battle elephant, positioned not as a symbolic figure, but as a military asset prepared to march in the emperor's service. Its discovery added a new layer to our understanding of the forces imagined by Qin Shi Huang, the ruler who unified China in 221 BCE and constructed this underground army to accompany him into the afterlife. The elephant was found in fragments, its massive body partially collapsed, but still clearly identifiable by its curved tusks, heavy legs, and broad head. Unlike horses, which appear throughout the terracotta army, elephants were not native to the northern plains of Qin territory. Their presence in the Emperor's tomb complex suggests something significant, either that elephants played a symbolic or ceremonial role in early imperial warfare, or that the Emperor intended to equip his phantom army with every possible advantage, drawing from knowledge of distant regions where elephants were used in battle. Elephants appear in early Chinese texts as creatures of the far south, associated with the borderlands of Yunnan and Southeast Asia. By the time of the Qin dynasty, elephants were rare in central China, making their inclusion in the terracotta army all the more striking. The artisans who sculpted the elephant seem to have studied the animal closely. The terracotta form captures the thickness of the legs, the heaviness of the trunk, and the mass of the head in a way that differs from the stylized representations found in earlier Chinese bronzes. The pits where the elephant was discovered form part of a larger auxiliary zone, separate from the main infantry formations. This zone includes figures of acrobats, musicians, officials, and animals, suggesting that the emperor wanted not only a military escort, but a complete world around him in death, echoing the functions, roles, and spectacles of his life at court. The elephant may have been part of a ceremonial procession, a royal parade unit, or a representation of an exotic creature brought under imperial control. The craftsmanship of the terracotta elephant aligns with the techniques used for the human warriors. Artisans shaped the animal in sections: trunk, head, legs, and body, assembling them with clay slip before firing. The sculpture was originally painted in vivid pigments that have mostly faded due to exposure and time. Archaeological reports note traces of red, black, and mineral-based colours on sections of the elephant's hide, suggesting it once stood with striking visual presence among the other figures. The elephant's role in warfare has long been debated among scholars. In regions such as India and Southeast Asia, battle elephants were used for charging formations, breaking enemy lines, and intimidating opponents. While there is limited direct evidence of elephants in large-scale Chinese warfare during the Qin period, there are accounts of elephants used by southern kingdoms during the Warring States era. Qin Shi Huang's empire absorbed vast territories and cultures, and it is possible that knowledge of elephant warfare influenced the emperor's decision to include one in his afterlife battalion. The discovery also highlights how diverse the terracotta army truly is. While the thousands of soldiers in the main pits draw the most attention, the outer zones reveal a broader view of imperial ambition, the emperor's belief that his power extended to the edges of the known world and beyond. The elephant is part of that vision, representing not just an animal, but a statement of universal dominion. Nearby excavations uncovered animal skeletons, stable remains, storage areas, and smaller terracotta creatures. These finds suggest that the emperor intended to recreate the diversity of the empire within his tomb grounds. The elephant's construction implies that specialized sculptors were assigned to particular figures, reflecting the organization and hierarchy of workshops within the imperial craft system. During restoration, researchers reconstructed sections of the elephant's body based on surviving fragments. Its size indicates that it was sculpted at or near life scale, standing taller than most of the human warriors. The weight distribution and thickness of the clay suggest that the original sculpture required careful internal support during construction, perhaps using wooden frameworks that burned away during firing. The presence of the elephant has prompted deeper questions about the emperor's understanding of the world. Did Qin Shi Huang believe he would need such an animal in the afterlife? Did he consider elephants symbols of power, foreign conquest, or ceremonial prestige? Or did the sculpture reflect political strategy, signalling awareness of southern kingdoms where elephants existed in reality? What is certain is that the terracotta elephant changes the way we imagine the emperor's tomb complex. Instead of a single military formation, the underground world becomes a more complete model of an empire, a place populated with entertainers, administrators, craftsmen, animals, and symbolic figures that together recreate the environment in which the emperor exercised authority. The elephant also reveals the technical confidence of Qin artisans. Carving a life-size animal from terracotta required mastery of proportion, weight, and detail. The sculptors created realistic curves in the trunk, subtle textures on the skin, and defined muscle lines in the legs, demonstrating familiarity with the animal's anatomy. Whether they had access to living elephants or studied imported representations remains unclear, but their skill is evident. As with many discoveries in the terracotta army, the elephant's full meaning remains uncertain. The tomb complex spans over 50 square kilometres, and only a portion has been excavated. It is possible that additional exotic animals, real or symbolic, still lie buried in yet unopened chambers. Each new find reshapes our understanding of how the Qin state imagined the afterlife and the emperor's eternal rule. Standing before the reconstructed elephant today, visitors sense something different from the disciplined ranks of soldiers. The elephant evokes a connection to distant lands and unfamiliar terrain, hinting at the vastness of the world known to the Qin court. It also reflects the emperor's desire to command not just armies, but nature itself, surrounding his spirit with every force that could signify strength, stability, and authority. The terracotta army was designed to be seen by no one, an underground realm meant solely for the emperor after death. The inclusion of a battle elephant shows the extent of that ambition, suggesting that even in eternity, he expected to maintain dominance across every corner of his empire and beyond its borders. The terracotta elephant stands today not just as an archaeological artifact, but as a testament to imagination, power, and the desire for control that shaped the early Chinese empire. It reveals that the emperor's vision extended far beyond human soldiers, encompassing animals, symbolism, and the geography of the wider world. Its presence brings quiet mystery to the already extraordinary landscape of the terracotta army. Hidden beneath fields outside Xi'an for more than 2,000 years, the elephant waited silently until its discovery, reminding us that the most surprising elements of ancient history often lie just beyond the edge of what we expect. The giant timber idol of Ruskar, UK. In the quiet wetlands of eastern England, where low-lying ground meets patches of dense reed beds and dark pools of water, a discovery in the early 19th century revealed a forgotten chapter of Britain's prehistoric world. Farmers digging drainage channels near the village of Ruskar unearthed a group of carved wooden figures unlike anything previously found on the island. Long, stylized, warrior-shaped idols, some nearly a metre tall, buried intentionally, along with a wooden boat and fragments of ritual objects. These figures, now known collectively as the Ruskar idols, offer a rare glimpse into the belief systems of a people who lived more than 2,600 years ago, long before written history in Britain. The Ruskar idols were carved from yew wood, a material chosen deliberately for its strength, density, and cultural significance. Yew trees grow slowly and live for centuries, producing wood that is deeply associated with endurance, transformation, and the boundary between life and death. Even in later British folklore, yew groves were linked to sacred spaces. For the prehistoric communities of the Iron Age, yew may have carried powerful symbolic meaning, which made the carving of human figures from this material an intentional act rather than a matter of practicality. Each figure has a simple yet expressive form. Their bodies are narrow and elongated, shaped with smooth planes and subtle contours. Their faces are defined by deep-cut eyes and carved noses that emerge directly from the wood, giving them a watchful presence. Some figures have slots in their torsos that once held detachable wooden arms, and one figure appears to have been designed to hold a weapon or staff, reinforcing the interpretation that these idols represented warriors or supernatural guardians. The most striking aspect of the discovery was the wooden boat found alongside the idols, carved from a single plank and fitted with small wooden paddles. The boat is not large enough to carry a person, but it is perfectly shaped, resembling ceremonial miniature boats known from other parts of prehistoric Europe. Its presence suggests that the idols may have been part of a ritual involving water, transition, or journey, concepts deeply embedded in ancient religious traditions. Archaeologists believe the Ruskar figures were intentionally placed in the wetland, possibly as offerings. Wetlands in prehistoric Britain were often treated as liminal spaces, places where the boundary between the human world and the supernatural was thin. Many societies across Europe deposited weapons, tools, jewellery, and even human remains in bogs and lakes as part of ritual practices. The Ruskar idols fit into this tradition, but add a unique dimension. Instead of offering valuable metal objects, this community offered carved representations of people, perhaps ancestors, warriors, or mythic beings. The context of their burial suggests that the idols were not simply discarded but carefully arranged. Their placement near the boat indicates a symbolic connection, possibly a staged journey for the figures, sending them across the boundary between the living and the spirit realm. The presence of multiple figures together also hints at group identity or a shared ritual purpose, rather than the representation of a single individual. While the idols are dated roughly to the early Iron Age, their style does not resemble classical Celtic artwork. Instead, they echo broader prehistoric traditions found in Scandinavia, Germany, and other parts of Europe, suggesting long-distance cultural exchange or shared ritual concepts across northern regions. This challenges the idea of Britain as culturally isolated during prehistory, and instead positions it within a network of symbolic practices that spanned coastlines and river systems. The surviving wood of the idols tells its own story. Their preservation was only possible because the oxygen-poor wetlands prevented decay. When found, the figures were waterlogged and fragile, requiring careful conservation to stabilise the wood. Their surfaces retain marks of the tools used by the ancient carvers. Small cuts, smooth sections, and transitions between planes that reveal the rhythm of the carving process. These marks are some of the earliest surviving evidence of woodworking techniques in Britain. The facial expressions of the figures have captivated researchers and visitors alike. Though simple, they convey a sense of alertness and intent. Their eyes are hollowed just enough to catch shadows, giving them an appearance of perpetual watchfulness. The combination of abstraction and presence suggests that the figures were not meant to portray specific individuals, but rather archetypal forms, warriors, guardians, or ritual participants whose identity lay in their role rather than personal features. The boat deepens the mystery. Boats in prehistoric ritual contexts often symbolize journey, transition, and the movement between worlds. The placement of the Ruskar idols within or beside a miniature boat suggests that they were participants in a ceremonial narrative. Perhaps they represented souls on a symbolic voyage, or protectors guiding a community's offerings into a sacred landscape. The fact that the boat is carefully crafted shows that it was not a child's toy or simple carving experiment, but a meaningful object. The Iron Age in Britain was a time of changing landscapes, social structures, and belief systems. Communities lived in small farmsteads or hill forts, traded with continental Europe, and developed complex rituals involving feasting, burial, and offerings. The Ruskar idols offer evidence of a spiritual dimension that emphasized symbolic representation, transformation, and the use of crafted objects to communicate with unseen forces. The discovery also highlights the importance of wetlands in ancient ritual practice. The people who made these figures chose a place where water shapes the land and where objects submerged beneath the surface become part of a timeless environment. To bury carved wooden figures in such a place suggests an intention to preserve them beyond the human world, entrusting them to the landscape. Today, the Ruskar figures are displayed in museum settings, standing upright once again after more than 2 millennia underground. Away from the wetlands of their origin, they retain a quiet presence that feels both human and otherworldly. Their surfaces, now stabilised, still carry the grain of ancient yew and the marks of the tools that shaped them, connecting modern viewers directly with the hands of prehistoric artisans. Their discovery prompts questions that may never be fully answered. Who were these figures meant to represent? Were they guardians, ancestors, deities, or participants in a story now lost? Why were they carved with detachable arms? And what weapons or ritual objects did they once hold? Why was a boat essential to their burial? While the details remain uncertain, the significance of the idols is clear. They reflect a society deeply engaged with symbolic representation and ritual practice, a society that used crafted forms to express ideas about life, death, and the relationship between humans and the natural world. They add dimension to our understanding of prehistoric Britain, showing that its spiritual traditions were as rich and complex as those of cultures with written histories. The Rus-Kar idols remind us that ancient people used art not only to decorate their environments, but to communicate with forces beyond their control. In their elongated bodies, carved faces, and ritual placement, they embody a worldview that saw the landscape as alive with meaning, and believed that crafted forms could act as intermediaries between the human and the sacred. Today, standing before the Rus-Kar idols, one feels a connection across time that is difficult to define. Their simplicity invites quiet reflection, and their survival speaks to the power of ritual objects to outlast the societies that created them. They are among the oldest wooden human figures in Britain, and yet they still convey a presence that feels immediate. The Great Bronze Cauldron of Hochdorf, Germany. In the rolling hills of southwestern Germany, where farmland meets forest and ancient river valleys cut across the landscape, archaeologists uncovered one of the most extraordinary burials of Iron Age Europe, a princely grave filled with gold ornaments, feasting equipment, decorative weapons, and at its centre a massive bronze cauldron capable of holding nearly 500 litres of mead. This object, discovered at the site of Hochdorf, stands today as one of the most impressive ceremonial artefacts created by the early Celtic world. The Hochdorf cauldron is enormous, nearly a metre high and over a metre in diameter, crafted from sheets of bronze joined with extraordinary precision. It was imported from the Mediterranean region, likely from a Greek or Etruscan workshop, around the 6th century BCE, during a time when long-distance trade networks connected Central Europe to the wealth and artistry of the Mediterranean. Its presence in a Celtic burial mound shows how deeply interconnected ancient cultures were long before Rome unified Europe. Inside the burial chamber, the cauldron was placed at the foot of a richly decorated wooden couch on which the chieftain's body rested. This couch, adorned with bronze fittings and intricate carvings, suggested elite status, but it was the cauldron that captured the imagination of archaeologists. When it was unearthed, traces of sticky residue lined its interior, remnants of honey-based mead that had once filled it. This was not a symbolic container. It was a functional feasting vessel used during ceremonies, gatherings, and perhaps the final ritual that preceded the chieftain's burial. The scale of the cauldron suggests gatherings of significant size. To fill it required an extraordinary amount of honey, water, herbs, and possibly fruit infusions, indicating access to resources far beyond ordinary households. Mead held symbolic significance in many early European traditions. It represented hospitality, alliance, celebration, and spiritual transition. In Celtic societies, feasting was not merely social, it was political and ceremonial, reinforcing networks of loyalty and shared identity. A cauldron of this size embodied abundance, generosity, and the role of the leader as a provider. The craftsmanship of the cauldron reflects the influence of Mediterranean metalworking techniques. Its bronze sheets were hammered thin, shaped into curves, and riveted with a precision that required skilled artisans familiar with advanced metallurgical knowledge. Around its rim, 8 decorative lion heads project outward, each cast separately and affixed to the vessel. These lion motifs echo Greek artistic themes, suggesting direct import or at least influence from southern workshops. To the Celtic people of Hochdorf, such imagery would have evoked power, nobility, and connections to distant cultures. The chieftain buried at Hochdorf lived during a time known as the Hallstatt period, named after another site rich in early Celtic materials. These societies formed complex chiefdoms with extensive trade routes reaching as far as the Black Sea, Italy, and the Mediterranean islands. Goods such as wine amphorae, bronze vessels, glass beads, and gold ornaments travelled northward, while raw materials like amber, salt, and metal ores travelled south. The Hochdorf cauldron is one of the clearest examples of how Mediterranean luxury items were incorporated into Celtic ritual life. The burial mound itself was constructed with remarkable care. The central chamber was built from timber, forming a square room lined with wooden planks. Inside, the chieftain's body lay on his decorated couch, wearing a gold-plated torque around his neck, massive gold shoes on his feet, and a belt adorned with intricate patterns. Containers for drinking, feasting utensils, and ceremonial gear surrounded him. The cauldron at his feet acted as the final offering, a vessel filled with mead that symbolically provided sustenance for the transition into the afterlife. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Hochdorf burial is how it reflects the dual nature of Celtic leadership, martial and ceremonial. While weapons were found in many elite graves across Europe, the Hochdorf chieftain was surrounded not by large caches of weaponry, but by instruments of feasting and hospitality. This suggests that leadership in this region emphasized social cohesion, ritual generosity, and the display of interconnectedness with distant cultures. The cauldron, the largest feasting vessel known from Celtic Europe, was the physical expression of that identity. Archaeologists studying the site believe that the burial followed a complex ritual. The chamber was prepared carefully, filled with symbolic objects, and then sealed beneath a mound of earth and stones. The mound itself became a landmark, possibly visited or referenced during seasonal ceremonies. In such a context, the cauldron may have played an important role not only in life but in death, representing the chieftain's ability to host, protect, and sustain his community even after he had passed. The cauldron's lions are particularly notable. In the Mediterranean world, lions symbolized power, royalty, and divine protection. Their appearance in the Hochdorf burial implies that these ideas resonated with the Celtic elite, who sought symbols that could elevate their status and link them to broader pan-European networks of prestige. The chieftain's acceptance of such imagery indicates a willingness to integrate foreign symbols into local traditions, while reshaping them within Celtic meaning. When the cauldron was finally emptied and analysed, researchers found not only mead residue, but small plant particles and traces of fermentation compounds. This allowed specialists to reconstruct the type of mead likely consumed, one flavoured with herbs, and possibly fruits available in Iron Age Central Europe. This blend would have produced a drink both intoxicating and symbolically potent, used during rituals of alliance, oath-taking, or elite feasts involving the wider community. The discovery of the cauldron in 1977 transformed our understanding of Celtic elite culture. It demonstrated that the Celtic world was not isolated, rural, or peripheral, but connected to continental trade and capable of merging foreign luxury goods into local identity. It also showed the sophistication of feast-centered leadership in early Europe. Feasting was not just celebration, it was a political act, a symbol of generosity, and a demonstration of control over resources. The cauldron's preservation was remarkable given its age. Its bronze surfaces had corroded, but its structure remained intact. Conservation efforts stabilised the metal and revealed details such as hammer marks, rivet placement, and casting imperfections that document the artisan's techniques. These details offer insight into early metalworking traditions that influenced both Celtic and Mediterranean craftsmanship. Today, standing before the Hochdorf cauldron, visitors experience a sense of scale and presence that photographs cannot fully convey. The cauldron's enormous belly, its smooth bronze curvature, and the lion heads projecting from the rim create a quiet aura that hints at the rituals it once witnessed. It evokes the sound of voices gathered around a fire, the clinking of cups, the pouring of mead, and the sense of unity created during communal gatherings. The cauldron also serves as a reminder of how ancient societies expressed wealth and status not only through weapons or architecture, but through communal experiences, shared meals, drink, and ceremonies that reinforce bonds among people. In this context, the Hochdorf cauldron becomes more than a container. It becomes a symbol of community, generosity, leadership, and continuity. The Great Bronze Cauldron of Hochdorf stands today as one of the finest examples of cross-cultural interaction in Iron Age Europe. It shows how objects can travel across continents and take on new meanings in the lands where they arrive. It also reveals how deeply human the past remains. The act of gathering around a shared drink, celebrating life, and honouring death is something that connects ancient Celtic communities with people today. The Stonehawk warrior of Tiahuanaco, Bolivia. Across the high plateau of the Altiplano, where thin air meets cold winds and distant mountains shimmer above vast plains, sits one of the most enigmatic ancient cities in the Americas, Tiwanaku. This was once the centre of a powerful civilization that dominated the Andes long before the rise of the Inca. Its temples, carved monoliths, sunken plazas, and geometric stone architecture form a landscape that feels deliberate and symbolic, as if engineered for purposes beyond ordinary function. Among its many monuments, one stands out for its presence, its mystery, and the story it carries through stone, the Stonehawk warrior, a massive carved figure that appears both human and avian, a guardian shaped from a single block of stone and positioned to look over the ceremonial heart of Tiwanaku. The Hawk warrior is carved in the tradition of the Tiwanaku monoliths, tall vertical stones shaped into anthropomorphic forms with intricate details etched across their surfaces. But unlike the more famous Bennett or Ponce monoliths, the Hawk warrior carries unique iconography. Its head is crowned with a stylized bird crest, its face bearing features that merge human identity with avian symbolism. The eyes are deep set and forward facing, with carved lines suggesting feathers or ceremonial paint. The broad chest and strong torso reflect human posture, while the hands, positioned at the front, hold ritual objects associated with authority and spiritual power. Tiwanaku's art was not decorative, it was symbolic. Every line, carving, and geometric pattern held meaning within a complex worldview that connected the natural world, the spiritual realm, and the political order. In this system, the hawk was more than an animal. It represented vision, protection, and the ability to traverse the boundary between the earthly and the divine. The Stonehawk warrior embodies this fusion, standing as a guardian, an intermediary figure, and possibly a representation of a priest or ruler who carried the essence of the bird through ritual image. The statue once stood near one of the ceremonial complexes, likely positioned beside a sunken courtyard or along one of the sacred pathways that connected the city's temples. Its placement suggests that it was part of a larger spiritual environment, watching over gatherings, rituals, and processions that moved through the heart of Tiwanaku. These spaces were engineered to amplify sound, reflect light across water-filled channels, and orient participants toward the surrounding mountains that Tiwanaku believed were living ancestors. The stone used to carve the hawk warrior is typical of Tiwanaku craftsmanship. Dense volcanic andesite, extremely hard and resistant to erosion. Carving such stone required controlled techniques using hammerstones, abrasion tools, and sand-based polishing methods. The smooth surfaces and sharp geometric lines on the statue show that Tiwanaku artisans had mastered stonework not merely as a craft, but as an intellectual discipline. Their precision rivals that of later Andean cultures, and the hawk warrior stands as a testament to this skill. Tiwanaku civilization flourished between 500 and 1000 CE, creating one of the most influential cultural networks in the Andes. Its reach extended into modern-day Peru, Chile, and Argentina through trade, religion, and agricultural innovation. At its peak, Tiwanaku supported tens of thousands of inhabitants, operating as both a ceremonial centre and a political capital. In this environment of social complexity and spiritual hierarchy, statues like the Hawk Warrior were not isolated sculptures. They were components of a living ritual landscape that shaped how people understood themselves and the world around them. The statue's avian symbolism is deeply tied to Tiwanaku cosmology. Birds, especially hawks and condors, played essential roles as mediators between the earthly realm and the upper world. They soared above the mountains, traversing heights humans could not reach, and thus became symbols of divine communication. The hawk warrior likely represented an individual or a mythical figure endowed with this bridging role, someone who communicated with higher forces or protected the community from spiritual imbalance. One of the most intriguing aspects of Tiwanaku art is its combination of geometric order and supernatural imagery. The hawk warrior's body is covered in patterns, interlocking lines, stepped motifs, and symbolic rectangles that likely correspond to ritual meaning or status. These motifs are consistent with Tiwanaku textiles, ceramics, and metalwork, showing that their visual language was unified across materials and functions. This suggests a highly structured belief system in which symbols carry consistent meaning across everyday life, ceremony, and governance. The excavation of the Hawk Warrior provided insight into Tiwanaku's architectural planning. It appears that the statue was part of a group of monoliths arranged to guide movement through ceremonial spaces. These monoliths may have marked boundaries between sacred zones or served as focal points for rituals involving offerings, chanting, or astronomical observation. The orientation of the Hawk Warrior aligns with directional pathways leading toward the Kalasasaya Temple, one of Tiwanaku's most iconic structures. Erosion across the statue's surface shows the passage of centuries, wind scouring, temperature fluctuations, and exposure to the harsh high-altitude environment. But even with weathering, the lines remain clear enough to convey the identity and purpose of the figure. Its expression, though simplified, reflects a sense of vigilance. It seems to watch rather than merely stand. The discovery of the Hawk Warrior also deepened archaeologists' understanding of Tiwanaku's ritual hierarchy. Monoliths often depicted individuals of high status, possibly priests or leaders who embodied supernatural attributes. These representations served not only as memorials but as active ritual participants, placed within temple architecture where they interacted symbolically with ceremonies. The Hawk Warrior likely belonged to this category, functioning as both a remembrance and a continuing presence. Tiwanaku's decline around 1100 CE remains a topic of debate. Climate change, resource stress, and political fragmentation may all have played roles. As the city was abandoned, statues fell or were buried by dust and soil, preserved by the dryness of the Altiplano. When modern archaeologists uncovered the Hawk Warrior, it appeared not as a broken relic but as a figure paused in time, waiting for its cultural context to be reinterpreted. Standing before the statue today, visitors experience a sense of grounded power. The Hawk Warrior is not colossal, yet it holds a commanding presence. Its weight, form, and placement convey authority without force. It reflects a worldview in which leaders were expected to carry spiritual insight as well as practical power, and where guardianship involved both physical protection and symbolic clarity. The statue also reminds us that Tiwanaku was a civilization shaped by observation of nature, of sky, of stone. Their monuments align with solstice markers, their courts reflect cosmological models, and their monoliths express relationships between humans and supernatural forces. The Hawk Warrior embodies this relationship, representing the merging of human responsibility with bird-like vision and adaptability. Today, it stands as one of the most recognizable yet least understood figures from Tiwanaku. Its form invites questions: who it represented, what role it played in ceremony, and how its symbolism transformed over centuries. While some answers remain speculative, the statue's presence speaks clearly. It was created to watch, to guard, and to represent power anchored in spirituality rather than conquest. The Stonehawk Warrior of Tiahuanaco is a reminder that ancient civilizations often expressed their highest concepts not through writing, which Tiwanaku did not leave behind, but through stone. In the absence of written text, the statue becomes the message, a carved testament to belief, authority, and the enduring connection between humans and the more than human world around them. The gilded tomb guardian of Kerma. In the desert plains of northern Sudan, where the Nile River bends across a wide floodplain and the land rises into low hills of sand and stone, lies one of Africa's most ancient kingdoms. Long before the pyramids of Meroe or the temples of Napata, the people of Kerma built a powerful civilization centered around vast royal burial mounds known as tumuli. Deep inside one of these tumuli, archaeologists discovered a remarkable statue, a large guardian figure once coated with gold, standing watch over the tomb of a Nubian ruler more than 3,500 years ago. This gilded tomb guardian is one of the most striking works of Nubian craftsmanship ever found, representing a world that stood side by side with ancient Egypt yet developed its own identity, art, and spiritual practices. Kerma was one of the earliest urban centres in sub-Saharan Africa, flourishing from around 2500 to 1500 BCE. It was a kingdom of skilled stoneworkers, metalworkers, and traders who controlled strategic routes along the Nile and maintained political independence despite Egypt's growing influence to the north. Its royal cemetery contained tumuli so large that Egyptian texts described them with awe, noting that the rulers of Kerma were buried in mounds that rivaled their own monuments in scale and ceremony. Within these tumuli, the people of Kerma placed statues and symbols meant to protect their kings in the afterlife. The gilded guardian statue represents one of these protective figures. It was carved from a dense dark stone and once covered in thin sheets of gold, applied carefully to create a radiant surface that reflected sunlight when placed at the entrance or inner chamber of the tomb. When discovered, much of the gold had worn away, yet traces still clung to the contours of the face and torso, revealing how luminous the figure must have appeared when newly placed inside the burial mound. The guardian stands upright, with strong shoulders and a forward-facing stance that communicates vigilance. Its facial features, though stylized, reflect the artistic traditions of ancient Nubia. Broad cheeks, strong jawlines, and almond-shaped eyes carved deeply into the stone. The figure's stance is neither Egyptian nor Levantine. It belongs entirely to the Kerma style, which emphasized presence and authority rather than idealized symmetry. This stylistic independence shows that Kerma was not simply adopting foreign forms, but shaping its own visual language. The statue likely held a symbolic weapon or staff, though the object itself has not survived. The position of the hands suggests readiness, not aggression, but protective strength. Guardian figures in Kerma's tombs were placed to stand between the earthly world and the sacred interior spaces where rulers were buried. Their purpose was not decorative. They were active participants in a spiritual system that relied on objects to maintain balance and protection long after the burial rituals ended. The tumulus where the guardian was found was constructed with layers of earth, stone, and mud brick, forming a mound large enough to be seen from great distances. Beneath this mound, a complex burial chamber was built with timber beams and plaster surfaces, creating an interior space designed to last for centuries. The Guardian stood at a transitional point within the chamber, a threshold between the outer passages and the final resting place of the king. Its role was to ensure that no harmful spirit or intruder could pass. The presence of gold on the statue is significant. Kerma was known for extraordinary metalworking, and its goldsmiths produced some of the finest jewellery in early Africa. Gold in Kerma held both symbolic and economic power. It represented purity, divine protection, and royal authority. By gilding the Guardian statue, the people of Kerma elevated it from a carved object into a spiritual authority figure, one that visually communicated the status of the king it protected. Within the same tumulus, archaeologists found richly crafted pottery, faience beads, bronze tools, ceremonial daggers, and the remains of animals sacrificed during the burial ceremony. These offerings were placed not only to accompany the king into the afterlife, but also to transform the burial mound into a sacred landscape. The Guardian statue was part of this transformation, anchoring the spiritual purpose of the tomb and participating in the rituals that ensured continuity of leadership beyond death. Kerma's burial traditions reflect a worldview in which the king remained an active force after death. The tumulus acted not merely as a tomb, but as a spiritual centre. Pilgrims may have visited it, ceremonies may have been performed nearby, and the Guardian statue would have stood as a constant reminder of the presence and power of the royal line. The statue thus served both practical and symbolic purposes, securing the tomb and reinforcing social identity. The craftsmanship of the Guardian shows a mastery of stone carving. The sculptors shaped the figure with smooth surfaces and clearly defined angles. Allowing the gold leaf to adhere evenly, they carved the eyes deeply so that shadows created the illusion of wakefulness. They created balanced proportions without relying on geometric templates. Every mark reflects intentional design, shaped by artisans who understood how stone, gold, and symbolism interacted. As Kerma declined around 1500 BCE, following Egyptian expansion into Nubia, many tumuli were damaged, plundered, or repurposed, yet some statues, including the Gilded Guardian, survived because they lay deep within sealed chambers. When modern archaeologists entered these spaces, they encountered a world largely intact, pottery still arranged along walls, burial goods untouched, and statues leaning silently where they had stood for millennia. The Guardian, even in its partially gilded state, evokes a sense of presence. It does not feel like a relic removed from context. It feels like a figure still fulfilling its role. Its gaze appears focused inward, as if continuing to watch over the invisible king it was carved to protect. This sense of ongoing responsibility gives the statue a quiet power that resonates with visitors and researchers alike. The statue also expands our understanding of Nubian kingdoms. Often overshadowed in popular history by their Egyptian neighbours, the Nubians were skilled builders, administrators and craftsmen. Their royal burials were elaborate, their spiritual systems complex, and their artistic traditions distinct. The Gilded Guardian reveals the depth of their ritual world and the sophistication of their visual communication. Today, the statue stands as a reminder that ancient Africa held diverse civilizations with their own monumental traditions. The Guardian speaks to a political world where kingship was reinforced through ritual protection, where gold signified permanence, and where stone figures acted as intermediaries between the living and the dead. It stands quietly but firmly, conveying dignity, memory, and resilience. The great gilded tomb guardian of Kerma remains one of the clearest windows into the royal life of this early African kingdom. It connects us not through grandeur, but through presence. The presence of a protector who stood at the threshold of a sacred chamber and still seems to stand there today. The megalithic granite trough of Uruk, Iraq. In the southern plains of Iraq, where the desert meets ancient riverbeds, and the land holds the earliest layers of human civilization, sits one of the world's first great cities, Uruk. Long before the rise of empires, long before kings wrote their victories in stone, long before writing itself was invented, the people of Uruk carved a massive granite basin that has survived the rise and fall of countless cultures. This megalithic trough, hewn from a single block of stone, represents one of the earliest monumental ritual objects humans ever made. It is older than written language, older than codified religion, and older than the city walls that once enclosed Uruk's sacred precinct. The basin was discovered near the ancient temple district associated with Inanna, the central deity of Uruk. This area, known as Eanna, was the ceremonial core of the early city, a place where rituals shaped both social identity and the spiritual imagination of the Sumerians. The trough's placement suggests it was not a utilitarian vessel, but a ritual monument, something used to hold offerings, water, sacred mixtures, or even symbolic purification fluids long before written texts describe how such rituals worked. The scale of the trough is impressive, carved from hard granite, a stone not naturally found near Uruk. It required quarrying, transportation, and shaping on a level that seems astonishing for a society still experimenting with large-scale architecture. Its sides are thick and precisely aligned. Its interior is smooth and evenly carved, suggesting a methodical approach to stonework, even though the tools available at the time were made of stone and early copper. Every surface shows intentional design rather than improvisation, meaning the people who shaped this basin were skilled, coordinated, and operating within an early ritual tradition. The trough's purpose remains partly mysterious. Archaeologists believe it may have been used for libation rituals, ceremonies that involved pouring liquids as offerings to the gods. In a world where writing did not yet exist, symbolic acts carried extraordinary meaning. Liquids such as water, milk, oil, honey, or fermented beverages may have been poured into or through the trough to enact stories of creation, renewal, agricultural fertility, or divine favour. The act of pouring was itself a dialogue between humans and the unseen world, and the trough was the physical medium through which that dialogue took place. The stone itself tells part of the story. Because granite is extremely hard, shaping it required perseverance and a deep commitment to the ritual process. The people of early Uruk could have created a basin from softer stones or clay, but instead they chose a material that would last for thousands of years. This decision reflects the emergence of long-term religious planning, the idea that sacred objects should endure across generations, anchoring the community's identity and connecting ancestors with descendants through shared ritual practice. Uruk at this time was undergoing rapid transformation. Small farming villages were evolving into urban centres. Irrigation networks expanded. Temples became institutions that organised labour, food distribution, and religious ceremony. The granite trough belongs to this early phase when communities began investing in monumental architecture and symbolic artefacts, establishing systems that would shape the development of Mesopotamian civilization for millennia. The basin was discovered in fragments, but the pieces fit together clearly enough to reconstruct its original form. Its walls are slightly tapered, and the interior shows signs of repeated use, faint abrasion marks, discoloration from ancient liquids, and small depressions where tools may have been applied. The absence of inscriptions confirms its pre-writing age. The people who used it did not document their practices in text. Instead, they embedded meaning in physical action. Near the trough, archaeologists found early temple platforms, offering vessels, animal bones, and remains of ceremonial architecture. These layers suggest a ritual environment in which large gatherings, processions, or seasonal ceremonies took place. The trough likely played a role in these events, possibly as a central feature around which priests or community leaders performed actions tied to agricultural cycles or divine stories. The scale of the object also implies communal participation. A basin of this size was not for individual use. It belonged to a space where many people gathered, where offerings were made on behalf of the entire community, and where the act of pouring or filling the trough carried shared meaning. In this sense, the trough represents the early roots of organised religion, a moment when ceremonies became collective rather than private, and when physical monuments shaped the social ritual experience. Transporting granite to Uruk required long-distance coordination. This suggests interactions with distant regions and highlights the sophistication of early Mesopotamian trade networks. The decision to bring such a heavy stone to the city reflects the emerging authority of temple institutions. Leaders of early Uruk could mobilize labor, negotiate with neighboring groups, and invest resources in monumental projects that reinforce their spiritual and political legitimacy. The trough's design contains features that may have guided water flow. Some sections slope gently, while others are squared off, hinting at controlled movement of liquids during rituals. This indicates an understanding of hydraulic behaviour centuries before the invention of formal engineering texts. Water, in particular, held deep symbolic meaning in Mesopotamia, tied to creation mythology and the life-giving properties of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. The trough may have been used to reenact cosmological narratives involving the emergence of order from primordial waters. Over centuries, as Uruk expanded into a true city, new temples rose around the old sacred ground. Writing emerged, administration developed, and monumental brick buildings replaced earlier structures. Yet the trough remained buried beneath layers of rebuilding, preserved as a relic of a time when religion and community life were still forming their earlier structures. When archaeologists excavated it, they uncovered not just a ritual object, but a window into the birth of urban civilization. The trough predates the earliest clay tablets. It predates the first lists of kings. It predates law, contracts, poetry, and recorded myth. In its silence, it carries the voices of a society whose thoughts were expressed not through writing, but through the weight and presence of stone. Standing before the trough today, one senses a simplicity that hides complexity. It is a carved basin, nothing more at a glance, yet its existence implies coordination, intention, belief, and memory. It embodies the transition from small communities to structured urban life, from scattered rituals to organised worship, from fleeting ceremonies to lasting monuments. The trough represents one of the earliest stages of human civilization's journey towards symbolism in architecture. It shows that long before texts explained rituals, objects enacted them. Long before temples recorded donations, basins received offerings. Long before societies built empires, they built meaning from stone. The megalithic granite trough of Uruk stands as a reminder that the origins of civilization lie not in kingship or warfare, but in the quieter moments when communities gathered around shared symbols. Its presence marks the point where belief, craftsmanship, and social identity fused into a tradition that would later give rise to cities, writing systems, and cultural memory. Today, it remains one of the oldest ritual monuments ever identified, still carrying the quiet authority of a time when humanity first began shaping the world with intention, ceremony, and stone. The colossal slab altar of Chavin, Peru, high in the Peruvian Andes, where steep mountain ridges cut through mist and narrow rivers echo between cliffs, lies one of the earliest and most influential ceremonial centres in South America, Chavin de Huantar. Built more than 3,000 years ago, Chavin was not a city in the traditional sense, but a pilgrimage complex where architecture, sound, darkness, and ritual objects worked together to shape the spiritual experience of those who travelled from distant valleys. Among the many carved stones that define this ancient religious world, one stands above the rest in scale and intensity, a colossal stone slab altar, decorated with complex jaguar-themed carvings that represent some of the earliest expressions of Andean supernatural iconography. The slab, weighing several tons, was carved from a single block of dense stone. It once lay at the centre of a ceremonial platform, possibly in front of one of the temple entrances or within an interior courtyard where controlled rituals took place. Its surface is covered in swirling lines, interlocking shapes, and hybrid figures that combine human and animal attributes, a signature of Chavin art. At the core of these designs is the jaguar, an apex predator revered across ancient Andean cultures as a symbol of power, transformation, and the ability to traverse the boundary between physical and spiritual realms. The carvings on the slab appear chaotic at first glance, but with careful observation the patterns reveal a structured symbolic system. Eyes, fangs, claws, and serpentine forms are woven into a single unified composition. Chavin artists intentionally blurred the distinction between individual shapes, making the viewer decode the imagery through ritual instruction or spiritual initiation. This technique reflects the esoteric nature of Chavin religion. Knowledge was not freely offered, it was earned through experience and participation in temple ceremonies. The slab likely functioned as an altar, a focal point where offerings were placed, liquids poured, or ritual performances conducted. Archaeological studies around the temple complex show evidence of canals that carried water beneath structures, creating sound and vibration that interacted with the carvings above. In certain seasons, when water levels rose, the temple resonated. The slab may have played a role in these acoustic environments, acting as both a physical and symbolic surface for ceremonies that merged sound, light, and movement. The jaguar imagery speaks to a powerful theme in early Andean belief: transformation. Shamans and ritual leaders were thought to cross boundaries between worlds through altered states induced by trance, fasting, or ceremonial substances. The jaguar, strong, silent, and nocturnal, became a model for spiritual metamorphosis. Its presence on the altar slab suggests that those who approached it entered a space where the ordinary world dissolved, and a more fluid, supernatural realm became accessible. Chavin de Huantar itself was designed to amplify this transformation. The site contains labyrinthine corridors, narrow passageways, and underground galleries where dark silence intensified sensory perception. Pilgrims entering these spaces would experience disorientation, awe, and heightened awareness, psychological conditions that reinforced the authority of the temple's rituals. The colossal slab altar, placed in an area of public or semi-public ritual, acted as a bridge between these hidden interior experiences and the communal ceremonies outside. The craftsmanship of the slab reflects technical knowledge uncommon for its age. Chavin stoneworkers used hammerstones, abrasives, and controlled pecking techniques to carve dense granite-like stone with remarkable precision. They created flowing lines that appear almost soft despite the hardness of the material. The surface's depth varies intentionally, allowing light and shadow to emphasize certain elements depending on time of day. This suggests that rituals may have been scheduled to align with natural lighting conditions, enabling the imagery to activate visually as sunlight shifted across the carvings. Excavations around the slab reveal traces of pigments, suggesting that at one time the stone may have been painted. Red, black, and yellow minerals were common in Chavin ritual spaces, and when applied to stone surfaces they reinforced symbolic meaning. Red for blood, or life force, black for the underworld, and yellow for divine transformation. If the slab was once painted, its visual impact would have been significantly more dramatic than its current weathered appearance. Chavin's influence spread far beyond its immediate region. Pottery, textiles, and stonework from distant Andean cultures show patterns inspired by Chavin's art, indicating that pilgrims who visited the ceremonial centre carried its imagery home with them. The slab altar, as one of the site's monumental ritual objects, would have contributed to this diffusion of ideas. It was not simply an artwork, it was a teaching tool, a visual theology, and a spiritual archive encoding the beliefs of an early highland civilization. The slab's placement in a public ceremonial area suggests that it played a role in unifying diverse groups. Chavin did not rely on military power to exert influence. Instead, it shaped cultural authority through religion, symbolism, and pilgrimage. The altar slab was part of this strategy, serving as a central piece around which rituals reinforced shared identity and spiritual alignment among people from different regions. Though the slab is massive, its design is intricate, a balance between monumentality and detail that characterises much of Chavin art. The sculptors achieved a sense of movement through curved lines that mimic the motions of serpents, rivers, or smoke rising during ceremony. The intertwining figures reflect a worldview in which boundaries were fluid. Humans could become animals, animals could embody spirits, and rituals could blur the lines between life and death. When the Chavin culture declined around 500 BCE, many of its monuments were buried by natural shifts in terrain or deliberately covered during later construction phases. The altar slab survived because it was incorporated into subsequent building layers, protected from erosion and collapse. When archaeologists uncovered it, they encountered not only a carved stone, but a piece of ideological architecture, a surface meant to anchor belief, focus ritual energy, and preserve symbolic knowledge. Standing before the slab today, visitors are struck by the density of its imagery. The carvings feel alive despite their age, as if they continue to pulse with meaning. The jaguar fangs, the curling forms, and the layered faces create a sense of presence that is difficult to articulate but unmistakable. Even without knowledge of Chavin symbolism, viewers sense the depth of intention behind the artwork. The colossal slab altar of Chavin remains one of the earliest large-scale ritual carvings in the Andean region. It bridges the gap between shamanic tradition and organised religious architecture. It marks a moment when art became a tool for shaping consciousness, when carved stone became a vessel for metaphysical experience, and when a civilization expressed its worldview not through text, but through symbols engineered for spiritual immersion. Today, the slab stands as a testament to the early ingenuity of Andean peoples, a civilization capable of shaping stone with remarkable skill and using imagery to guide human perception. It is one of the few surviving artifacts that allows us to feel, even faintly, what a pilgrim might have felt standing before it thousands of years ago, the sense of entering a world where animals, humans, and gods were not separate but intertwined through ritual, art, and belief. The basalt lion throne of Persepolis, Iran. In the dry highlands of southwestern Iran, where the landscape shifts between stony plains and distant mountain ranges, stands the ruined ceremonial capital of one of history's greatest empires, Persepolis. Built by Darius the Great and expanded by his successors, Persepolis was a city designed not for daily life but for spectacle, diplomacy, and ritual. Its terraces, staircases, relief walls, and columned halls speak to a world where kingship was expressed through architecture, space, and carved stone. Among the lesser-known monuments scattered across the site lies a remarkable object, a massive basalt throne supported by carved lions, a symbol of royal authority and an echo of the political stage once played out across these monumental platforms. The throne, constructed from large blocks of dark basalt, was positioned in a location associated with ceremonial functions, possibly near one of the audience halls where the king received envoys from across the empire. Its form is deceptively simple, a flat seat supported by sculpted lions that crouch beneath the platform, but the symbolism contained within it reflects centuries of Near Eastern visual language. In Achaemenid iconography, lions represented both royal power and cosmic order. By placing the king's seat upon lion figures, the sculptors were communicating the idea that the ruler sat above the forces of strength, dominance, and stability that maintained the empire. Persepolis was a place where power was choreographed. Processions of tribute bearers climbed staircases, guards flanked doorways, and courtiers assembled in carefully arranged formations. The throne, though modest in scale, compared to the monumental architecture surrounding it, played a role in these performances. It was not merely a piece of furniture, it was a symbolic anchor in rituals that affirmed the king's legitimacy. When the king sat upon it, the throne transformed into a visual statement of authority, linking the human body to divine and political symbolism embodied in the lion forms. The craftsmanship of the throne is consistent with Achaemenid stonework, restrained, balanced, and precise. The lions carved into the base are not exaggerated or overly decorative. Instead, their power is expressed through proportion, posture, and controlled detail. Their bodies are compact and muscular, suggesting tension and readiness rather than movement. Their faces are stylized but expressive, with carefully carved eyes, nostrils, and manes that balance naturalistic elements with artistic tradition. This blend of stylization and realism reflects the Achaemenid goal of representing power rather than animal behavior. Basalt is an extremely hard stone, and shaping it required considerable effort. The sculptors likely used iron chisels, abrasive sands, and repeated hammering to produce the throne's flat surfaces and detailed figures. The decision to carve the throne from basalt rather than softer limestone, which dominates Persepolis, indicates that it was meant to endure. This durability aligns with the Achaemenid concept of kingship as a force that should transcend the lifetime of any individual ruler, a principle echoed in inscriptions declaring the king's authority as divinely sanctioned and continuous. The throne's placement within Persepolis is significant. It was found near an area where high-status activities occurred, possibly tied to the Apadana or the Tripolion, structures associated with royal audiences and administrative gatherings. These areas were designed to manage the flow of people, ensuring that only the most important figures came into close contact with the king. The throne, therefore, may have served during events where the king acknowledged foreign envoys or received offerings from vassal states. By seating the king on lions, the throne visually reinforced the political hierarchy embodied in these ceremonies. The lion motif has deep roots in the ancient Near East. From Mesopotamian cylinder seals to Egyptian throne supports, the lion appears as a guardian, a symbol of kingship, and an embodiment of controlled violence. The Achaemenids adopted this imagery but refined it into their own style, emphasizing calm strength rather than ferocity. The lions beneath the Persepolis throne convey watchfulness and composed power, reflecting a ruler who commands through order rather than chaos. Persepolis itself was designed to convey this sense of controlled grandeur. The vast terraces, the symmetrical layout, and the reliefs depicting diverse peoples offering tribute all serve to express the unity and reach of the empire. The throne existed within this architectural narrative, supporting ceremonies that reinforced imperial identity, even if it was not the primary seat used during New Year festivals or grand receptions. It played a role in the broader system of ritual performance that defined the site. The throne also reflects the Achaemenid understanding of space, Seating arrangements were symbolic. Height, orientation, and placement relative to architectural features determined status. By elevating the king slightly above those approaching him, the throne created a visual hierarchy that mirrored political reality. The lions supporting the throne acted as both literal and symbolic foundations for this hierarchy. Although Persepolis was burned during Alexander's conquest in 330 BCE, many stone elements survived. The basalt throne, partially damaged but still recognisable, offers a rare glimpse into the movable ritual furnishings that once complemented the site's architecture. Because wood and metal objects have largely perished, stone pieces like this throne help reconstruct the ceremonial environments of the Achaemenid court. The throne's survival also highlights the durability of its symbolism. Even without its original context, the draped textiles, the decorated halls, the assembled courtiers, the object retains its message. It communicates authority through form, through the relationship between seat and support, and through the timeless imagery of lions as guardians of power. Archaeologists studying the throne have noted that its style is consistent with other Achaemenid carvings, suggesting it was produced by local workshops rather than imported. This local production indicates that Persepolis maintained highly skilled artisans, capable of working with difficult materials and producing objects for royal use. These artisans were part of a broader network of craftsmen who contributed to the construction of the city, carving reliefs, shaping stone blocks, and creating the visual identity of the Achaemenid Empire. Standing before the throne today, one senses the quiet authority it was designed to project. It does not overwhelm with size. Instead, it draws attention through presence. The stone lions seem poised to endure, their stillness communicating a kind of eternal vigilance. The seat above them, though plain, becomes meaningful through the relationship it forms with its supports. Even separated from the rituals that once activated it, the throne retains its role as a symbol of structured power. The basalt lion, throne of Persepolis, reminds us that ancient kingship was not only political but performative. Authority was expressed through ritual gestures, visual symbolism, and objects that connected rulers to long-standing traditions. The throne's lions link the Achaemenid dynasty to earlier empires, while establishing a uniquely Persian interpretation of sovereignty rooted in order, balance, and controlled strength. Today, the throne stands as a quiet fragment of a once mighty ceremonial world. It captures a moment in history when architecture, sculpture, and political identity merged to create one of the most enduring visions of empire. Even in ruin, it continues to speak, through stone, through form, and through the careful balance of human intention and symbolic meaning that defined Persepolis. The Titan stone head of Tlaloc, Mexico, on the outskirts of the ancient Valley of Mexico, where volcanic mountains frame broad plains and seasonal rains still determine the rhythm of life, stands one of the most imposing stone sculptures ever carved in pre-Hispanic history. The Titan head of Tlaloc, a 165-ton monolith dedicated to the powerful rain and storm deity of central Mexico. Today it rests near the National Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City, but its journey and meaning stretch back to a world where mountains were living beings, storms were divine messages, and stone itself served as the language of the gods. The head was originally discovered in the region of Cotlinchan, southeast of modern Mexico City, where it had lain partly buried for centuries. Local communities knew of its presence long before archaeologists formally identified it, seeing it not merely as an artifact, but as a guardian of the landscape. When researchers confirmed its identity as a representation of Tlaloc, the significance of the monolith became undeniable. This was not an ordinary sculpture. It was a work of monumental devotion, created through immense labour, engineered with precision, and positioned within a ritual landscape that connected mountains, lakes, and agricultural cycles. The monolith is carved from basalt, a volcanic stone formed in the very geological forces that shaped the Valley of Mexico. Working such a dense material required sustained effort using hammerstones, chisels made from harder minerals, and abrasive techniques to smooth its surfaces. The sculptors who shaped Tlaloc's face carved deeply set eyes framed by circular goggles, a rectangular mouth, and patterns that symbolize water, fertility, and storms. These features are not artistic exaggerations. They reflect a deep symbolic system in which each line and contour carries meaning related to rainfall, lightning, and agricultural survival. The sheer size of the monolith communicates its purpose. At more than 7 meters tall and weighing an estimated 165 tons, it is beyond what any single workshop could have created casually. Its construction required a coordinated workforce, likely organised under state direction, involving quarrying, shaping, transporting, and positioning in a ceremonial context. This scale places the Tlaloc head among the largest single stone sculptures in the ancient Americas, comparable in weight to some colossal Olmec heads and major Andean monoliths. Yet unlike those figures, the Tlaloc head was not a portrait, but a divine presence carved into stone. In its original location, the monolith stood within a ritual landscape connected to nearby mountains and water sources. In Aztec cosmology, mountains acted as vessels containing water, reservoirs that fed springs, rivers, and agricultural fields. Tlaloc, as the deity of rain, storms, and agricultural fertility, was believed to reside in mountain sanctuaries. The placement of the monolith near natural water sources suggests it functioned as a symbolic interface between the physical world and the deity's supernatural domain. People approached it not merely to admire its scale, but to participate in ceremonies meant to ensure life-giving rains. The Aztec worldview was intimately tied to the environment. Without predictable rains, crops failed, and with failed crops came famine. Tlaloc therefore occupied a central position in religious life, receiving offerings ranging from food and precious stones to ceremonial figurines. In the most somber rituals, even human lives were offered, based on the belief that extraordinary gifts were required to earn the deity's favour. The stone head, with its powerful features and unwavering gaze, stood as a physical reminder of these responsibilities and hopes. When the monolith was moved in the 1960s to Mexico City, the event became a national moment. The transport required engineering on a scale rarely attempted for archaeological artifacts. Cranes, cables, and specialized machinery were brought in to lift the stone from the ground and move it across many kilometers. Thousands of people lined the streets to witness its passage. Even then, engineers had to pause multiple times to adjust for weight distribution and road strain. When the monolith finally reached its destination near the museum entrance, a summer rainstorm unexpectedly broke overhead. For many observers, this coincidence reinforced the symbolic presence of Tlaloc, suggesting that the deity had acknowledged the movement. Seen up close, the monolith's face reveals both symmetry and intensity. The circular eyes framed by goggles relate to imagery found in central Mexican art for centuries, appearing in temples, murals, and pottery across different cultures that preceded the Aztec Empire. The rectangular mouth, sometimes interpreted as a stylized jaguar maw, represents water emerging from caves or mountains, a metaphor for rainfall descending from the heavens. The geometric patterns surrounding the face suggest waves, currents, and cycles of renewal. Together, these features create a deity whose expression is stern but not frightening, powerful but not uncontrolled, present but not anthropomorphized in a strictly human sense. The craftsmanship reflects a long tradition of stone carving in central Mexico, While the monolith lacks the fine detail precision seen in smaller Aztec sculptures, its monumental nature required different priorities: stability, visibility, and symbolic clarity. The sculptors carved with broad strokes, ensuring that the features remained recognizable from great distances. This visibility mattered because the stone was part of public ritual environments where large gatherings occurred. Its presence shaped the mood and meaning of ceremonies, reinforcing the idea that Tlaloc watched, listened, and responded. Archaeological studies around its original site revealed that the monolith may have been part of a larger architectural arrangement. Foundations, stone alignments, and water channel remains suggest a ceremonial plaza where offerings were made. The monolith could have marked an entrance, a focal point, or a boundary between mundane space and sacred space. In this sense, it acted as a spiritual threshold, a point of transition for participants entering ritual states or performing agricultural ceremonies tied to the cycle of seasons. The scale of the monolith also invites reflection on societal organisation. A sculpture this large required political coordination, technical skill, and social cooperation. It indicates an early form of state labour mobilization in central Mexico, well before the Aztec Empire reached its height. Communities that carved such stones understood how to transport immense weights across uneven terrain and how to anchor them securely. They also understood the deeper meaning behind the effort, the belief that monumental offerings strengthened the bond between humans and deities who controlled the natural world. Today, the Titan head of Tlaloc stands outdoors, exposed to rain and sunlight, much like it once did. Visitors walking along the museum grounds often stop before reaching the entrance, drawn to the monolith's imposing presence. Its surface bears marks of weathering, but the essential features remain intact. The eyes still stare forward, the mouth still opens slightly as though mid-pronouncement. The carved patterns still convey water, motion, and life. Even removed from its original setting, the monolith retains its authority. What makes the monolith especially compelling is not only its size, but its continuity of meaning. While many ancient sculptures become academically distant after removal from their context, Tlaloc's monolith continues to evoke the same understanding it once did: that rain is essential, that water sustains life, and that relationship with the environment requires attention, respect, and ritual acknowledgement. In ancient times, people gathered before this stone to seek balance with forces beyond their control. Today, visitors gather for reasons that may differ but feel strangely related, a mix of curiosity, humility, and the sense of something larger than human effort. The Titan head of Tlaloc remains one of the most iconic artifacts of Mexico's deep past. It embodies geological history through its basalt, spiritual history through its symbolism, and human history through the immense effort invested in its creation. It stands as a reminder that ancient societies understood their environment with a sophistication that modern perspectives sometimes overlook. They carved mountains into gods because they lived intimately with the mountain's power. They shaped stone into divine faces because they believed the earth itself watched over them. Even now, the monolith retains a quiet, commanding presence. It tells the story of a world where rain was not just weather, but a divine relationship, where stone was not merely material, but a medium for dialogue with the supernatural, and where people carved their understanding of life into forms meant to endure beyond their own lifetimes.